Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Magic Mics, proudly sponsored by CoolStuffInc.com and Mana Traders, as well as Twitch subs and Patreon supporters just like yourself. I am Evan Irwin, and we get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Power Dragon.
What's up, everybody? Y'all missed a crazy pre-show if you weren't here.
It's a fun one. Ruben Bressler.
I wasn't here, so I'll have to catch up on it.
He really did. He missed a lot of the fun.
I had some issues.
Yep.
It wasn't my fault per se. I can't prove that it wasn't my fault, but the entire block lost power.
Wow. So you're right. Your powers are getting more stronger, as you're saying. Like they're increasing.
If it was my fault, I gotta go down to the League of Champions or whatever.
Well, I've been watching
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
There we go.
I've been watching some Gen V, man. Stuff gets weird when you have superhero powers. That's a good show, by the way. It's really good. Now, if you missed our pre-show, patrons and subscribers of this channel get access to our extended version early. And with that, we can get on with our first pick in our giveaway. Get your chance at $50 worth of anything at CoolStuffInc.com by typing !raffle in the chat. But sub first to get those 2 chances to win. Get those dangling primes. If you got primes in there, check it out. Support your streamer with your suggestions. Then the show to see who we raid tonight. Thanks to our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every single day. And we begin our first pick where I can imagine there was no news that was going to trump this one, as it were, as we moved into this week. As of October 13th, per the announcement last Friday, Wizards of the Coast will no longer be partnering with Judge Academy. They appreciate the work the Judge Academy has done the past few years to provide service for Magic judges and organizers. And they're currently working with tournament organizers and stores for a new framework, and we'll talk about some of that as well. I think the big takeaway was ultimately that the Judge Academy, as trying to be sort of a for-profit venture, didn't seem to be working very well. And when the last promo set was a set of basic lands that had nothing really special or unique about them, that felt pretty rough as well.
I mean, that was the writing on the wall, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of those ones, like, I saw the announcement and it wasn't surprising. You know, like, I don't know of anybody I could say that said they had a particularly good experience with the Judge Academy, both judges and event organizers. So, I mean, I guess it was time. Like, it was a cool experiment. We tried it. It didn't work. And now we just move on to other things.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have we have the luck to have Pharmacist Judge as part of our community, as part of somebody who supports the show. And he knows that he saw that it was kind of useless to him, and it was a doomed enterprise. He noted it never had the funding it needed to deal with the fact it was a global organization. That's another huge thing, which these people tried to like make these things sort of nonprofits. Nonprofits can't work across like country lines and borders. It just so many different rules, in so many different places, and so they could not find a reasonable method to be a nonprofit internationally. So you can't really volunteer to help the Judge Academy if it's for profit. That's how that works. Much of the Judge program was built on many volunteers. WotC greased the wheels, but the momentum of the goodwill of the judges who want to make the program better was stifled by Judge Academy. He notes here, pivoting slightly to the Judge Foundry, which is kind of the next part of this story, is that, what was it, a couple days later, maybe the next first this week, popped up the Judge Foundry account on Twitter. They're excited to announce the formation, a new community-driven nonprofit association dedicated to supporting judges in the U.S. and Canada. And note, this type of fracturing is not necessarily bad. And in fact, it will, from what Pharmacist Judge and others are saying, it will actually help to foster those areas and the judging in those areas to be a bit more compartmentalized, because Judge Academy clearly tried to be everything for everyone, and it wasn't much of anything to anyone.
Well, I don't think the average person who goes to an event, because you never have to think about it, this is an organizational level thing, doesn't understand how difficult it can be to be aware of all the judges and everybody's skill level and who's worked with who and what type of history does somebody have with this company or this store or whatever. That's hard to do just within the United States when you're normally run your events, say, in Texas, and you're trying to run something in, I don't know, Arkansas or even Ohio or whatever, right? It's going to be a different set of judges than you normally work with. Imagine trying to be that person who organizes something, like in your case in Orlando, and then is trying to run an event in Canada or even overseas, like you're saying, it could be England or whatever.
I worked on GP
You're
London.
not going to be familiar with all those people.
Right. I worked for GP London at SCG, and it was really difficult. Like, we basically kind of flew everybody over versus trying to get necessarily local talent because I didn't have those connections. I didn't have that availability. I didn't know everyone in all those spaces, and so that made it much more difficult. It's not impossible. The show still happened, yada yada, but it didn't include a lot of people who were around London, and for that, I felt it was kind of a miss.
Yeah, and if you don't have that information, you're going to want to bring your trusted team effectively, right? You're going to get bare minimum 3 or 4 of your better head judges or scorekeepers or whatever you've used before,
right?
And say, okay, I at least know how you work. You know how I work. I'm gonna bring y'all, and maybe we'll get a handful of people locally to help us out, which. Then the locals feel bad because they're like, well, this is the first big event we got. How come I don't get to work this thing? Or why do I not have judges that I'm familiar with as a player? And I have these people who came from, 4 countries away or whatever to come judge us. So I think this does stand to be a better overall experience.
I hope so. I feel bad for every judge, including those that tried to make this program work. All the people that at the Judge Academy wanted was for the judges to be paid fairly and reimbursed fairly for their efforts. That's all they wanted out of this. They weren't trying to do some draconian takeover of the judge program. There was a need that was left gaping and wide open on purpose by Wizards of the Coast, and they tried to come in and fix it. And unfortunately, the Judge Academy fix experiment has, as we've now seen, not borne out. Hopefully something will fill the void, because I do believe that Magic the Gathering should have people who understand the rules and have no skin in the game at competitive events deciding on rulings. If you're going to have a competitive Magic the Gathering environment, you need to have an officiant operating it. And having a central institution of judges has been around for 20 years. So
there's a true twofold kind of issue here, though, right? The first is that they kind of came to being just prior to the pandemic, right? So you already lost a lot of time for people, one, to even run events or care about judges, but the other for your judges to get practice and everything else. So so the timing wasn't great from that aspect. And then along with that, you have a lot of organizers, retailers, whatever, that have learned they don't need to take as much of a loss on Magic events to be profitable, right? Because they learned a lot of things from the pandemic.
Well, they also quietly dropped some of the requirements, right? These larger events did not require a level X or Y judge any longer. But
I think a lot of them do still try to have a judge, from what I've seen. Like they still try to run it as well as they can.
Right.
But with that, you have players, especially the competitive players, they're trying to min-max their value on all these events, right? And you, on the one hand, they'll say, hey, we want our judges to be paid better. And they're like, okay, cool. But if we pay that judge $100 and we only have a 25-person event, we're going to need to up the entry fee on each of y'all $4 or $5, right? And they're like, well, hold on a second. Like, I don't want to do that.
Not like that. I mean, the judge program itself has a whole sort of weird myriad history of, it was created by Wizards and it was providing compensation in the form of judge foils. At one point, there was a lawsuit about them being employees and not sort of treated as employees, not having employee benefits.
Yeah, that was a fun time.
And between, well, and those things aren't necessarily connected in that they had to stop paying the judges in foils, because it cost Wizards, $1 to make these foils, and they were worth $800 on the market, and something tax evasion. The point is that had to stop, and then the employee thing came up, and then Wizards just kind of just chopped it off right at the top. And then there was, what are we supposed to do? And the Judge Academy came along and said, okay, we'll take a mantle, because you need some sort of organization to reach out to try to make your event run. And each organizer can't necessarily have their own kind of, crop of judges that they use, particularly if you run events in different spaces. And so this whole thing has just been like, what do we do when Wizards kind of wants to support it, but can't support it too much, because that would impact them potentially later in various legal problems, and it's rough.
I also feel really badly for the people who create Magic the Gathering, who we know tons of people who work at Wizards at high level positions, but not so high that they have any power as it pertains to decisions like this, that are former judges, that are, good friends with former judges. They try to give as much power to the judge community from their seat within creative, from their seat within, the places that they can be. A bunch of folks in there who are former heads of judge communities and institutions work inside the building at Wizards of the Coast, and they have no power not only to enact change, but to even talk about any of this.
Because legal came in, and when legal says jump, you say how high, and you say thank you, Mr. Lawyer, Mrs. Lawyer, sir, and you leave, and that's the end of those discussions.
I remember when that case came up, and I remember asking people, like, what do you think the real outcome is going to be of this? Right? Like, they're not going to win anything. They're not, because the reason I knew the case wasn't going to go their way anyways, because they're also not mentioning in the case, from what I remember, all the other stuff they got as compensation either. Right? Like, you do sometimes get cash. You are getting hotel rooms. You are getting booster boxes. You are getting, like,
right.
They weren't including any of that. They were just talking about, well, hourly, I should be getting whatever. And then when that got brought up, they were like, time out.
Wait a minute. Other compensation, what? So that's a whole mess. We're not trying to dissect that. But regardless,
sure.
Let's go ahead and move on. Out of the first pick, to get out of the townsfolk. Thanks to our sponsor, Mana Traders, the best tool to enhance your Magic Online experience. Use the code MagicMikes for 12% off your next subscription with Mana Traders. As we move to gather the townsfolk, what's been going on in the community? Well, we do have ourselves a winner of the Arena for Championship. Congratulations to Shinya Saito, who took the event with Is It, a blue-red Wizards deck in the historic metagame format, and that deck is very good and very strong and very scary, and just got even better with sleight of hand. So, high five.
Dude, let me tell you, doing commentary on it, Shinya played great. There were multiple games, it just looked like he was getting beat down or whatever, and just held on to the right card or dealt with one thing, and then 2 turns later was able to just hit somebody for 14. Like it was the craziest thing. It's like so many good games were played. And I'm not gonna lie, a little bit mad at the event because it was historic and the games were actually really good. So I can't talk crap about historic this week. Like it
Look, the beauty
less to talk about.
Right. The beauty for me of watching super high level Magic or any sort of high level competitor is that they can do things that in that situation you would have messed up. You know what I mean? When you watch them do stuff and you go, wait a minute, they did so-and-so because they thought of such and such. I would have never have done. You know what I mean? That's where I see Reed Duke clearly losing what I clearly see as losing. Leave the screen, come back, he's won the game. And I'm like, no, wait, what? That's not how it works.
Not just that, but when we're doing commentary, even if we can see a line, we're making this with perfect information of just okay, if he holds onto this card and draws this and maybe kills this thing, there's these 3 things. But as a player, without that information, they are still able to get to that conclusion.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It's incredible. So the metagame wasn't necessarily skewed per se. There was Dimir Control with Monograin Devotion in there, and Golgari Yawgmoth, and Izzet Wizards was in there with 12.5% of the field. Sure. But, overall, not too bad, not too swayed, where most people are saying, for example, the modern format right now, the Rakdos deck is just Rakdos in everything.
Right. This format seems like it's pretty open. There was no deck that was more than 20% of the metagame, which is pretty good, particularly for a small field event like this was.
Right.
As opposed to, like you say, modern is just Rakdos. What they're calling Rakdos Scam. I don't know if they would allow us to put Rakdos Scam into the deck database.
No, it's Rakdos mid-range, buddy. Get it
Rakdos Evoke, I think.
Rakdos Evoke was another one.
Is a good one.
That's probably more accurate. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean the historic metagame seems interesting and open, and there's room for innovation. So,
but yeah, overall it seemed super duper fun. Now, one thing to remind everybody is that there is going to be a ban restrict announcement on October 16th. So how are we feeling about the state of our formats at this point?
Let me. It's tough because standard is actually pretty open,
pretty
even though there's still a fair amount of Shieldred. Don't get me wrong.
There's a
fair amount of mono.
Yeah, there's some better answers these days.
But you're seeing a lot more variety of decks, and even if you go back to the World Championships, Standard had a lot of different things that got played.
Mm-hmm.
So the more I think, like, there's cards I would like to see something done to, just because again we're going to be in this long rotation of Standard, and we got to get through the holidays already and whatever. But I don't know. There may be nothing done to Standard, honestly. And I know people hate to hear that, but it might be fine to just leave it alone.
I'm pretty sure that something is going to happen with Shale Dread still in Standard.
Oh yeah, and will be for another year.
I feel like that one's a pretty low-hanging fruit. That's like an Alrund's Epiphany kind of ban, where it's like it's gotten to dominate for its lifespan, and now we're going to put it on the shelf.
And that's kind of how I feel about it. Like, it pops up enough even in some non-standard formats that it's a little bit annoying.
Right.
Like,
where you've hit kind of your Fable status, right? Where Fable wasn't the greatest necessarily, but it was so good in its slot, in its mana cost, you couldn't not run it if you're running red and you needed a 3-drop.
I knew Fable was dumb once it started showing up in the mono red aggro decks.
Yeah, I mean, once it started
there's just no
Legacy,
reason for that.
Wow. So like Shieldred is every single 4-drop, let alone black 4-drop, is going to be measured against her continuously. And I think they cranked it maybe a little too high, maybe one too many toughness, maybe had one too few of a mana cost or something. But either way, they can't alchemy this thing, which we'll get to in a second. And as a result, you've just got a format where people just feel like, well, if I can't afford Shouldreds, what am I doing here?
Right.
Which brings us... that's what I'm concerned about. Is I think right now it's mostly fine, but as we start pushing toward getting people to play more paper Standard, unless you're planning on putting at least 2x Shieldred in whatever the next round of whatever we call the tournament decks or whatever you can get every spring, like, you're going to be looking at $40 to $50 Shieldreds. And I don't think that's
Shieldreds. Like,
well, yeah. And I don't think that's conducive to getting people to play Standard. So if you do want to ban it for that reason, to encourage more people to play and make the decks more affordable, I'm actually with that idea. I don't have a problem with that.
And then as we talk about modern and the older formats, I do think that the One Ring and Orcish Bowmasters are on the table. I'm not sure that the bottom line is incredibly affected by either of those cards getting banned in Legacy. So I would be less surprised to see them get banned in Legacy and Vintage.
Yeah, I don't think so, at least quite yet, unless they got some serious recommendations from people I haven't seen talk about it. Right. But let's go ahead and bring that up while we're here. It wasn't going to be in Desperate Ravens, but whatever. Wizards did actually rebalance the One Ring to have a 1 generic mana added to its activation cost, and removed Orcish Bowmaster's Enter the Battlefield trigger, and that's fantastic. I don't know how else to say it. I'm flabbergasted. I can't believe they actually would touch any Lord of the Rings cards before the holiday set came out, because they don't want to sort of hurt or scare anybody away from buying those products.
You know what's funny though? I thought they were going to, because they did appear in a lot of deck lists from the Arena Championship. Not every list, but a lot of them. Mm-hmm. But they didn't really dominate any games. Matter of fact, when me and Corey were on commentary, we were at one point saying, it's kind of interesting. We only saw an activation of the ring, I think, like 5 times throughout the weekend. Right? There was one game where somebody had it in their hand and they didn't even play it the whole game.
Wow.
So
interesting.
And the deck that won wasn't playing either one of them. Right? Like, so the more we talked about it, I said, I mean, do we need to do something about these cards? Like, I think we do. They're both really powerful cards. I think we need to. But I don't think they were still, even though they're great and absurd, they still weren't as dominant as I think we'd made the Boogeyman out to be.
I think that both cards are still in the conversation for best card in their respective formats, and that each format can decide how to handle them individually. For this to rebalance them in this way, I think is good. And I like that they're using the tool that they have at their disposal, even though I did see some hand wringing and some complaints about the changes and how you don't want your most popular cards from your thing to be different online. To which I say, what are we changing otherwise? Like, there's nothing we can possibly change unless it's these 2 cards or literally every other card.
Well, as a weirdo who plays Alchemy and tries to play the Alchemy format, and it's generally, I generally enjoy it a little bit more than Standard because it's a little more varied. It's not just the Shouldred, show or whatever. Mm-hmm. Bowmasters and the One Ring were everywhere. Because the Lord of the Rings is like standard level powered. These are not standard level power cards. They are the clear not standard power level cards of the set. And fixing those was huge, was important.
And that's a big problem with these straight past standard into the Eternal format cards in general. It's why the Evoke deck is so powerful. It's Commander Masters and Modern Masters the deck.
Basically,
we've gotten to the point where, so many of the high-powered formats are just design mistakes being played against each other, right? And something has to be the best. And did you mean it to be the best, or did it just show up there because, oops,
The intent of Modern was to be a place where you could play the best of standard past, and then it evolved away from that. And part of that is because they wanted to add some spice to the format. Part of that was they were chasing the brass ring as it pertains to non-standard release Magic the Gathering products. And they've chased the brass ring so far that they let go of the previous one, which was Magic the Gathering standard, right? Which is why we're seeing fewer people play standard and limited than older formats.
Yeah. Quick call out to Corey Bowmaster, happens to be hanging out in the chat tonight.
What's up,
friend
buddy?
of the show, obviously, friendo, helper of Power Dragon to make things happen.
I was just saying wonderful things about you, Corey.
That's right. And he appears. Who knew?
The other half of Team Powerbomb, by the way.
There you go.
Ooh, Powerbomb is a great name.
So this kind of came, I don't know if out of nowhere is the right way to put it, but certainly was surprising. Troll and Toad backs off of Magic the Gathering after an almost 30-year run. Trollandtoad.com is a very old web store that's been around for a very long time. For as long as I've been near or around Magic, I have heard of Troll and Toad. And it's basically the end of an era for certain, as they mentioned here on ICV2, which is like the kind of hobby news website. Since 1994, they've been one of the large-scale buyers. They've been selling stuff, buying stuff for a long time. As I understand it from those who sort of either work there or know the people who own it, the people who now own it are much more interested or excited about Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And when you have, and stuff comes from the top, and so from the top, they don't really care about Magic. They don't sort of incentivize it. They don't put it at the forefront and so on and so forth. Then that's going to affect how you buy it, how you sell it, how you treat it. And sometimes it's, things like Commander Masters can bowl you over, and that totally sucks. Sometimes a Baldur's Gate will also wreck you super duper hard. And after a while, if you do enough stuff where Magic stops being profitable, then you just kind of change gears. And for what it's worth, Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! Are doing just fine. So it's not the worst idea in the world.
This is where I need a button to just tell you to hit my theme music. Because, I have so much to say about this.
Oh.
No, okay. First off, everybody that was freaking out online, them leaving the Magic market has nothing to do with anything.
It does.
Right.
It really does.
Ask any player, and if you follow a lot of these threads, because I was reading a bunch that were on Reddit, on Facebook, on Twitter, and most of the people in the chat didn't even know what a Troll and Toad was. They had no idea. So if most of the players don't even know, that's why they're getting out of the market. Right? It's not because, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of other things with too many Magic cards and whatever, and we can talk about that all day. But them leaving has nothing to do with anything. Most of their...
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, this isn't like some, oh my God, the world's ending. This is one of the four horsemen of Magic goes away. No, this is a large retailer exits the space. It's worth noting because you don't see that often.
Right.
Yeah, but most of their money, for anybody who's even dealt with them at all over the last few years, has come from what I would call tertiary games, right? They were dealing in Hero Clicks minis and Dragon Ball Z cards, and they were one of the few places you could sell some of that stuff to. Nobody was going there for Magic stuff. Most of the people, not to just disparage somebody, but a lot of the comments you saw was that they had bad experiences even dealing with them. Troll and Toad, to my knowledge, hasn't even showed up at any of the major shows I've been at in the last 7 years, maybe.
Yeah,
I'm trying to remember the last time I've even seen a Troll and Toad booth, and I'm talking about all of them. PAX, any of the Comic Cons, Magic Cons, whatever. They haven't set up anywhere, so they just haven't even been part of the Magic community. So yeah, this has nothing to do with anything. This is just business on their side, and like you said, there's been two changes in ownership technically that led to the current ownership having it, and they just aren't Magic fans. So yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah. I think that this is also, it's also worth noting that this move is very similar. It's the same announcement, just with the VIN numbers scratched off, of the announcement of Cool Stuff moving away from board games. It's the same announcement.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean board games are going away forever. Right. Just like Troll and Toad going away from Magic doesn't mean Magic's going away forever. It's companies that are, I'm going to call mid-size, even though they're pretty big, 100 employees, trying to survive the Amazon apocalypse is really what I feel this is. And I think that that's fine. That's perfectly reasonable for companies that are trying to sell everything, companies like Cool Stuff, companies like Troll and Toad, to pare back a little bit and focus on what matters to them. And Troll and Toad's audience cares more about these sort of other games than Magic, just as you just mentioned.
Hell, I wouldn't even be surprised if you go by Troll and Toad's site over the next 60 days, 90 days as we move into the beginning of the new year and see a bunch of other games just taken off their site, because it's just not going to be worth their hassle for them to deal with them. They're probably just trimming the fat, know what their expertise is, and they're just going to double down on that, which is actually just smart business.
Yeah, that's not bad business sense or business decisions. Again, if the person who owns / runs it doesn't really care about a certain product line, you're often not going to be super successful with that product line. That's kind of where that came from. But with Cool Stuff, which is the Amazons and the Kickstarters came in and said, we're just going to take all that business, and so let's not try so hard chasing that, going after that very large boxes that are super heavy versus, hey, one little tiny card across all these games. Lorcana just came out, One Piece is killing it. Like, let's. And
this is Troll and Toad just like staying in their lane, refocusing on themselves. Sure. Good therapy rules, and just continuing to power forward.
Now, don't get me wrong. If you'd have told me this was Cool Stuff or Star City or Card Kingdom or something, okay, then we'd have some stuff to talk about.
Then I would be a lot more concerned per se, or a lot more to say about it. But yeah, either way, that's a whole thing. So moving on here, before we get to Desperate Ravings and me yelling about stuff, there was a fantastic video, of course, made by Ristic Studies, who doesn't know how to make awesome videos. It's just everything he does is fantastic. Where he talks about
doesn't know how to make bad videos.
Doesn't make bad videos. Sorry. And Ristic Studies had on what's his name? Let's see, Sirkovitz from 17 Lands. They talk basically about Dominaria United was a great limited set. In particular, how you can look at sort of the graphs of how decks were made and the makeup of those decks that showed what a really cool and interesting format it was. Because while Streets of New Capenna wanted to be a 3-color set, kind of ended up being sort of a 2-color set. But as Dominaria United, really, you could play full domain, 2-color, 3-color, 4-color, all of the colors, and make it work in some fashion. And that's just fascinating to look at from a whole variety of angles.
Yeah, really interesting video. A lot more inside baseball nuts and bolts than I'm used to seeing Ristic Studies videos. Ristic Studies, to me, is the gateway to Magic content. This would not be the first video I'd show a new Magic player.
This is intro stuff. Yeah.
But for people like me, there's a lot more to chew on. People like us who've been here forever. Right. Really interesting stuff from their 17 Lands and from Basilisk, which is a new esports org focused on science of games. Nice. Some really interesting stuff going on in this video. So if you are if you're really interested in the nitty gritty, again, probably not a great video to show your mom to teach her what Magic's about. But if you're already a lifer, if you're already trying to, understand.
He's already made that video called The Black Lotus, and it's wonderful. And you can show your whole family and they will totally get into it. It's great.
One thing I will say is I think you sometimes need creators like that to do that type of video, right? Because a lot of times those videos, like I said, come from the people that love all those stats and they're way inside baseball, and they can almost get too analytical and nerdy about it to where it becomes inaccessible. And this is at least a nice presentation of that information that, again, I don't know if I show it to everybody, but as people start getting maybe to that point of being more competitive or they have those curiosities, this is at least a fun one that I think is still an accessible video, even if you don't necessarily care about the information all that much.
Yeah, it revolves around a really brilliant concept, and the way that Sam does this is just fantastic. And that Kurt Vonnegut was like, "Can I make a chart to show what a story looks like? Can I
Yeah.
chart it in front of me?" And then he said, "Well, can you chart an entire limited format?" And yes, we can. And it's really awesome to see those correlations. Just a terrific piece of work. Fantastic. All right, cool. Now I'm going to start yelling. Okay, I think. Look, I think there's an amount of like being tired, like being overwhelmed, being completely kind of crushed with new Magic product that has kind of kept going over the past couple years in particular. But I think we reached a new point of insanity over the last week, and it's like it's just been washing over me, because I see from both sides, everybody. I see the community side, excited about stuff, but I also see the back end side of businesses who have to deal with trying to sell Magic product, and that's one of the things that Wizards does not have to deal with. They can make 37 versions of whatever. Who cares? They're not over there trying to pull them all from packs and put them into shelves and whatever. They unleashed 1,200 cards. This is 189 new cards. They unleashed 1,200, just under 1,200 new cards in the span of a week. 1,200. Are you out of your mind? Have you lost your freaking... What is going on? What is happening? Is this going to be just as bad for Fallout? Is Fallout going to have 2,000 cards amongst its 5 decks? I swear to God, it's crazy. For a retailer, this is absolute madness. We've had people around the clock making items because 1,200 cards in the span of a week is absolute insanity. I don't even know how to explain it. What in God's name did all of these versions, why are they here? What are we doing? Is this real life? Did I just see 1,200 cards out of a damn Commander set? What is happening? I don't get it. I can't understand it. Someone's got to explain it to me, because I swear to God, we have just gone to complete crazy town. None of it makes sense anymore.
My problem with the product, my problem with it is that I'm not sure who even is expected to buy the boosters, right? That's kind of where I'm caught up at, right? If 90% or better of the players, I would assume, are going to just put in their orders and get a full set of the decks. Maybe even 2 sets, because they want the cards to put into a bunch of their other existing Commander decks or whatever. Sure. But you can get a set of the decks for, what, 30% more, 50% more than you would getting a box of the collector's boosters or whatever. So why not just get another set of the decks? That's the first issue. The other is, there are going to be cards that are, well, most of them, because they all seem to have gotten 5 or 6 versions or whatever.
Right.
A lot of them that are not going to be that spectacular, that still got the special treatments or whatever. But to even collect them would be so absurdly expensive and effort consuming that it's not even really worth the effort to try to go and collect a whole 1,200 cards or whatever, right? It just doesn't make sense. I don't know who you're targeting. And I get it. I'm good with having products for the whales. I really am. I think that's a thing that most lines of products and collectibles should probably have. But even this doesn't make a lot of sense. Outside of maybe opening a serialized card or something, or I guess the 1 per box Surge foil, I don't know who's going to really want a lot of the rest of the stuff. And if you do, you're just going to go spend the $10 or whatever and buy the singles for it. Like, why would you buy a box of these? And I just don't get it. I don't get it.
And people are not necessarily buying them, and it's giving headaches all over the industry, and it's crazy. And Warhammer was one thing, because all it had was the collector decks and the regular decks. And the collector decks were a one-time printing. They sold out. Everybody was happy with them. High five. The people who wanted the bling stuff got the bling stuff. The people who likes throwing it in closets, like me, got the closet throwing value in there. Fantastic. You made twice as many cards as the decks. You did not make 6 times as many. Are you crazy? I don't get it. It's wild. We have just gone completely over the edge. If you thought you could keep up with Magic in any form or fashion, I just feel like Doctor Who was just like the epitome of there's no way you can keep up with this.
And I don't think
you're never going to see all the other cards ever.
I don't think this was necessarily even just a money play either, because like we discussed before the show, like I think you very well could have made the decks an extra $10 more if you wanted to, maybe even $15 more. Toss in some of those collector's style boosters, or they don't have to be collector's boosters. They could just be random inserts or whatever.
Like little mini packs that they've done.
Yeah, then you get 15 or 20, maybe even 30 bonus cards that could be the serialized cards or the Surge foil or whatever. So you already get another bonus in the pack if you want to. and we still would have paid it. People would have bought those all day. People would have been excited to buy more decks, but I don't think they're going to buy the collector's boosters.
Yeah. I don't know why we need 5 different versions of every card.
We don't.
We literally don't. And as much as
nobody wants them.
I love Wizards, but like,
so why are we making them? Like the thing, but I mean that in this sense, which I understand we can talk about. We're all agreeing about the same thing.
Yes.
But the thing that I'm actually having trouble understanding, that I think you might be able to help me with from a business side, because of the 3 of us, I'm not the one who's ever really worked in an office setting. We all, the 3 of us, understand that value is being put into this product that is not value, or energy is putting into this product that is not being translated into value.
Sure.
The number of reprintings has diminishing returns immediately.
Right.
Or the number of types have diminishing returns immediately. So what is it momentum of, number go up, the more things we have, the better it is? Is it because the last time, the first time we introduced surge foils, everyone was like, we want surge foils. The first time we introduced borderless, everyone wanted borderless. So we're just going to put them all in the same set and not look at the rest of the detail. Where is the breakdown in the communication between what we're saying and what it seems like the community is saying, and the message to the feedback that there isn't an audience for this? Or is there an audience and we're just old
The thing
folks?
is, most of these cards don't have anybody that want them. Like, you can check a ton of different sites, a bunch of them, like hell, a bunch of them will sell equal to the value of the regular version or lower in some cases, which is wild, except for things like your surge foil, your serialized cards, your whatever. And those are the true chase cards.
Right, but even those, now, like the surge foil stuff that now appears in higher rates and things, like we were talking about Lord of the Rings, like, I don't, like, the fact that I can show them, I've even said on the show that special, like, the special versions of cards sell 50% what the normal does. Like, literally double the normal version sells over the, special whatever version of the card. And, like, to double down so hard, it feels like there was we're in a boardroom somewhere and we're looking at all the Warhammer numbers, and someone says, man, if we had just made collector packs instead of those collector versions of the decks, we would have cleaned house. And they were like, well, we're doing this Doctor Who thing. And they just said, well, let's swing for that fence. So 1,200 whatever plus cards later, which after, thank you, the Maverick Girl, after tokens and surge foils is over 1,200. God help us all. It's just insane. I can't, I don't know if there was one point in which I'm just like, stop the insanity circa 90s. This is it. This was where I was like, guys, you just went too far.
There's
gone
something
way
else
too far
too, though, right? Like, this is also a case of sometimes where your consumers ask for a thing and don't even know what they're asking for, because you have all these people that keep saying like, oh, we want Magic to be super cheap and no Magic card should ever be more than $5 and blah, blah, right? Or I'm just going to proxy everything. Well, if they print a lot of things, a lot of stuff is going to be cheap enough. But then you hit that same problem where part of these arguments for this whole troll and toad thing, if you listen to some people, was, well, now they can't make money because there's not as many cards worth anything or whatever. And it's like, well, isn't this what you asked for? Right? You've been saying you want cards to be cheaper and you want things to be able to be acquired, but now also you're not able to sell your stuff for as much. So now you're taking that as a bad sign on the game. It's just like, well, no, because you got what you wanted.
And there's also a point that Darkness King brought up in the chat, which is particularly for IPs that maybe Magic doesn't have full control over, putting as much stuff in this print run makes sense.
They're using,
I don't hate that argument.
It's not that I sort of hate against it. I think that Wizards has forgotten, and they've told us, they've literally said this, but they've somehow forgotten that things get less cool the more you do them over and over. You lose the coolness. Full art lands now have 1000% lost their coolness. They were super neat and super unique, and they brought them back in Zendikar, and everyone lost their mind, and they were worth good money for a long time until they just started doing them and everything. Jumpstart, brilliant idea. Let's do it for every set. Commander decks, brilliant idea. Let's do it for every set. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so now it's like, well, they like collector stuff. They like expensive versions. Let's do a whole collector set that adds 6 versions of everything. Like, it's too much. This was the breaking point for me, where I was like, guys, you have to stop doing this. This is just not cool. You're making the whole product to me just like painful to look at / read / get through, because everything has 6 versions and everything looks different. And at some point, when everything's unique, nothing's unique.
I think the problem for me too is the lack of acknowledgement, which, because they don't have to deal with it at Wizards, that, like you're saying, there's going to be all this work put in for a lot of people, whether it's on a website trying to build all the different code for each individual SKU that's got to go on there,
right?
Or somebody's collection to format all their binders and whatever to collect all these cards or whatever it is, right? There's a lot of logistics that go in for cards that I'd imagine even some of the cool stuff is probably over the life of the next 2 years not even going to sell a couple hundred of.
I mean,
because there's going to be so few people even looking to buy them.
Right. If we're looking for inside baseball, if you would like me to tell you on the business side of things, the fact that you have to have more employees than you did just a few years ago just to try and keep up with making all of these items.
Yeah.
The fact that you have to have more, just straight up, like, think of plastic dividers. Think of the ways that you store the cards, and you have to separate all the different things. We have to buy a ton of these extra dividers just to keep up with the different versions so we can have them sorted. Sorting errors, people trying to buy cards in the storefront, everything gets more difficult and more painful and slower and just bothersome every time they do this. And they've just gone to 11, and somebody needs to tell them that, you know, we're in a Spinal Tap moment, and you need to stop. Like, we've really gone too far when you did 1,200 new things in 1 week.
I'll just put myself out there.
wild.
If they need consulting on ideas on ways you can do this and still make a lot of money and still have rare versions, I got you. My DMs are open.
We can help.
I think
like,
the
seriously,
easiest
I'm not even joking.
is-
My DMs are open. We can. I know people at R&D. They can call me.
Man,
Like,
I think the easiest answer is all of these individually are good ideas. Like, search foils are a cool idea. Borderless cards are a good idea. You don't need to put everything that's on the buffet on your plate at the same time. So just, like, put 2 or 3 of them per set instead of 5 and 6 for every card.
It didn't have to be a collector booster, though.
That too.
We could have got more money out of the regular decks and still moved a lot of these cards. Same thing we were talking about with the March of the Machine Aftermath or whatever, right? You could have had another way to make all those cards available.
Right.
It didn't have to be in these dumb collector boosters or whatever, so you're getting 50 copies of every card or
and
whatever.
like each collector
Only a
booster
50
6
card
cards,
set.
which was so
Right.
ridiculous.
This doesn't make any sense.
In the interest of ending this topic on a positive note, however, I have seen nothing but love and adoration from the Doctor Who community on the Doctor Who cards.
It
Seems like they are the people that know about both fandoms are extremely happy with the faithful recreations of the storylines and the characters and the things from the show.
Oh, I'd imagine these decks are probably going to be the second most sold decks in the year, probably behind Lord of the Rings.
Like, they're selling great. the decks are selling great. The collector, not so much. I mean, and I don't think that's a huge surprise to anybody.
And I think that's not a surprise.
And to end on a positive note, which I think I found absolutely hilarious, which was from Saffron Olive, who's like, I don't know Doctor Who, so a lot of these cards are just like people rearranging furniture or somebody reading a book, and it doesn't make any sense.
But to be fair, that's going to happen with these like
funny.
Universes Beyond or Secret Layer things, because there's a lot of properties some of us don't know and we're not fans of.
Yeah, listen, I was at a commander night last week, and somebody was playing with one of the Transformers cards as their commander. And I don't know what it is about the Transformers cards. I've committed some of the Street Fighter stuff to memory. I've committed some of the Doctor Who stuff to memory. You could tell me anything about an individual Transformers card, and I would not know anything. I've committed none of that to memory. I don't know why that is. They just confuse me, and they're weird. And so, like, I look down at a commander game, and this game has Rick Grimes from Walking Dead. And this game has Splicer, I guess, from Transformers, and this game has the Eighth Doctor, and this game has the One Ring, and I'm like, cool. Magic the Gathering is for everybody.
Yeah.
What a world! Let's move on here. Turn the
Multiverse
corner
of Madness
to the finisher. We now have all of the Doctor Who cards out and a top 10 on the way, but until our lists come out, tell me, what are you looking forward to most from the new Commander offering, Ruben?
Well, I actually love the massive number of variants, unlike the last 15 minutes that we just talked about because of the premise of this joke. Because if any set is going to have 15 copies of a single card, it should be the Regenerations of the Doctor.
Makes sense. Power Dragon.
That's fair. I'm actually kind of excited for all the Doctor Who lore to get a new audience, because if nothing else, old has-been dinosaurs like me need some love too.
Nice. Well, I am excited for all of the cool Cascade stuff coming down the pike, because Cascade is maybe Magic's most exciting, but also bizarre mechanic, and perhaps no intellectual property exhibits that sheer randomness and weirdness better than Doctor Who. That's what they do here. And that ends another live episode of Magic Mike's. Thanks for joining us here to discuss all things Magic. Thank you, Power Dragon.
Man, thanks for having me as always, and for people listening to put up with me and my rants.
Thank you, Ruben.
We've been doing this show for a long time, and the fact that Power Dragon feels... Listen, if you have rants, you're in the right place.
This is where you belong.
We appreciate
friends.
We appreciate
I'm telling you, we need theme music.
Delivering the rants. Oh yeah, soundboard would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you all for checking in and listening. Check out your make sure you don't have any dangling primes. Give us a comment wherever you listen to this, YouTube, iTunes, whatever. And thanks for tuning in.
We appreciate it. And we're going to move here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, Cool Stuff Inc., our co-sponsor, Mana Traders, my co-host, Power Dragon, and Ruben Bressler. You guys for watching and listening. Hope you support us at patreon.com/magicmikes. Please follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe to everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online on our Discord, twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Or join us here next week. Same time, same place for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.